Arizona time. And tonight we have a panel that and others that will be joining us. And we're going to be talking about NFT, which stands for non-fungible token, innovation and dynamic property rights. So this is an area that I think is very exciting and opens up a whole new dimension for property rights in particular. And there's been a lot of excitement about this in the last 2-3 months. So let me just kind of skip through a little bit and show you how the evening's going to go. First of all, we're going to hear from Jaycen Horton of Nori, and Nori is a carbon removal trading platform that actually uses non-fungible tokens to represent the carbon that's being removed from the atmosphere. We have Josh Abbott from the ASU Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law, and he'll be talking about overview of non-fungible tokens, somewhat from the legal perspective and innovation perspective. And then we have Chad Eylander, who's an active member of the Desert Blockchain community and a citizen. And Chad's going to be doing a demonstration of Flow, which is one of the predominant NFT platforms, showing the dashboard and some other things and providing us with some links. So this is the presentation that will be available to all starting tomorrow morning, the 29th, after, let's say, 8 a.m. But for Desert Blockchain citizens, you should have a link to this presentation. All Desert Blockchain citizens get the presentation in advance, as well as a link to the Zoom session. So I'm just kind of skipping through the LinkedIn profiles of Jaycen, Josh, Chad, and then I wanted to show you towards the end, there's some additional material that you might find interesting. Here's a post from Paul Gamble, the co-founder of Nori, talking about how NFTs are used in the carbon removal process, trading process of Nori. And then here's a presentation that Jaycen will be going over. Here's a presentation that Josh Abbott gave to ASU Law, and we'll have some links in here from Chad Eylander as well. So I'm going to, and by the way, if you are watching this on YouTube, the live stream, please feel free to add your comments or questions into the chat. And this recording will be available immediately. However, there's about an hour-and-a-half long section that you can just skip through until that's edited out sometime tomorrow or the next day. So I will stop the screen share at this point. And thank you all for joining. Are there any questions or comments before we go into the respective panelists? All right. Well, Jaycen, why don't you take it away? Tell us a little bit about Nori and how you are using non-fungible tokens to remove carbon from the atmosphere.
Sure. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, name's Jaycen. I'm one of the co-founders at Nori. I am the principal blockchain architect, really just kind of jack of all trades on the tech side, do most things engineering, although blockchain is, while initially was a big part of Nori's picture, we actually kind of abstracted away a lot of the blockchain and decentralized components from what we do. And now we're actually at a point where we're starting to reintegrate a lot of those concepts and ideas. So, you know, back in the day, Nori actually started out as a decentralized app. Sometimes people call this like a DApp. And we've kind of moved away, kind of made it pretty centralized so that we could kind of get the full life cycle of what we do in. And now we're kind of trying to reintegrate a lot of the concepts of like tokens and non-fungible tokens and a lot of things like that. So I'll go over a lot of that here, and let's just kind of get into it. So before we go too far, I'm going to kind of give a brief overview on fungible versus non-fungible tokens. I'm going to assume that most people on this call or tuning in, kind of know at least at a high level what they are. But just as a recap, fungible tokens can be thought of as things like dollars. It's where every token is the same. If you've got an allocation of like $100 bills, and I take the first one off the stack and you take the second one off the stack, yours is no more valuable than mine. They're both worth $1, and they're kind of used as a medium of exchange. On the flip side of the equation, you've got something that is called a non-fungible token, which just kind of has a property of non-fungibility, meaning it's got unique attributes to it that make it not ubiquitous, like across a stack of things. So if you've got a stack of trading cards, for instance, if you take off the top one and I take off the second one, you might have one baseball player and I might have a different baseball player, and so they may have an underlying different value for that asset under under the hood. The kind of primary examples here for fungible tokens are like the dollar. On the Ethereum blockchain, typically any ERC20 is also a fungible token. One of the more common ones that kind of shares the attributes of like a real world fungible asset is the USDT, which is the Tether. Another example is like the USDC, which is Coinbase's like stable coin, or DAI, or several other kind of stable coins. Those are all pretty standard examples of a fungible token. On the flip side, you've got non-fungible things such as crypto kitties, such as artwork, such as property deeds. We'll kind of go into some of the different examples there. So right now, the primary thing, the thing that's got the buzz for NFTs going is artwork. Funny enough, though, the NFT standard, what's known as ERC 721, is basically something that was actually launched back in, I think, 2017 or 2018. And actually, the thing that gave it the initial launch, or like the two common things that gave it the initial launch were, I think ENS, the Ethereum name service, was the first actual NFT. The other really common one was CryptoKitties, which was infamous back in the day because it effectively clogged down and crashed, brought to a really slow crawl the Ethereum blockchain. Transaction throughput was really low, and it took several days for some transactions to go through because everybody was, really inclined to jump in there and try out these new things. Now we've got kind of like a resurgence of that same exact concept. The underlying standard, the underlying code is all very similar. There have been some adaptations and some extensions to the standard, but what you've got now is effectively that same concept, but it's now being applied for or by like artists and musicians to sort of create a representation of a unique asset on the blockchain. So you got the Mona Lisa and you want to, or you create a new Mona Lisa and you want to like represent that on the blockchain. You kind of hash some of the details about it. You put some of the metadata in kind of like a raw text as well onto a transaction. You send that transaction to the Ethereum blockchain and create a new token representation of it. And now you've got effectively an explorable version of that asset on chain, which can be assigned individual ownership. Now there are some additional concepts that can be explored or trialed. Some of them are being explored in the realm of like property deeds or other asset ownership. We'll get into Nori's use case, which kind of falls into that second bucket a little bit. So NFTs at Nori, basically we've got on the Ethereum smart contract, or on the Ethereum blockchain, we've got a smart contract here. I'll open it, which is this Nori certificate of carbon removal. The Nori certificate of carbon removal is effectively a namespace where you can create new tokens for one of two things. Either a supplier in the Nori marketplace can come into the marketplace, go through the process of submitting data and going through verification for a process called carbon removal, which basically is a farmer that comes in who's been practicing certain types of sustainable practices based on some given switch year. So they go from a non-sustainable practice to a sustainable practice, and you take what the difference is between those two practices. So if you've got this new crop rotation that is now pulling in or storing, 100 tons of carbon per year, across the whole of the land. That farmer can then go through the whole process and create a representation of that carbon removal on the blockchain and through the Nori marketplace. So you can actually see an example of that. So if I open up any individual one of these things, if I look at the first token that was ever actually created, this token is going to represent something akin to that, which is the first carbon removed in the Nori marketplace, which was by a farmer named Trey Hill, who stored, I think, somewhere around around like 10,000 tons of carbon over the course of 10 years, and created several different Nori tokens as NFTs on the Ethereum blockchain. So you can see that there is, this different metadata that is part of that sort of transaction. So when an NFT is created, you can send and attach that metadata. And part of that metadata that we send are a few different attributes, which I won't go too far into just so that we have enough time for everybody else on this call to go into their use cases. But the most important part is they've got this serial number, which kind of gives a breakdown of the individual suppliers, like attestation of carbon removal, like how much they removed, where they removed it, what years they removed it, et cetera. And then you've got like sort of like a bucket that tells you how much the total they removed. So for in this case, this particular first NFT, which we call NRTs, represents 1,027.2 tons of carbon removed, for example.
Jaycen, would you tell us how much this particular farmer earned in order to sell these particular tokens?
Yeah, so right now, if you go to nori.com, for instance, you can, the way that it works is it's a first in, first out queue. So the first suppliers to list then can sell those tons of carbon removed as NFTs effectively to any buyer who comes in a first in, first out ordering. And so we launched and the price was, I think it's around $15 per ton. Let's just use that to stay consistent. So this supplier, Trey Hill, created, so this issued number is how many NRTs or how many like non-fungible token amount that they created and encapsulated in one of those NFTs on chain. And then they sold 100% of them for about $15 each. So whatever the math there is for that, it would be around 200K or so. I think math off the top of my head is right. And then that went, directly to the farmer. Nori charges a transaction fee on top of the base fee. So the $15, the farmer gets 100% of that, and then we charge it's like $1.02 or something like that on top of it, and so we get the transaction fee from that.
So I calculate roughly $210,000 went to this particular farmer.
Yeah, and so we've done that same process. Now we're in the process of the second supplier here, which we sold approximately the same amount. So do that same math, and we're sitting close to 500K, I guess, 400-ish K. And then they have about 10,000 more or so left to sell. And I think there's even a third one in here. Yeah, so there's a third supplier in here as well who's also issued those. So they're going first in, first out. So until the NRTs listed here on supplier 2 have sold out, then the NRTs on supplier 3 won't start to go. So pretty standard first in, first out queue. Does that answer your question, Jay?
That does answer my question, and I have muted everybody. If I think you can unmute yourself. If you can't, please just post in the chat that you'd like to be unmuted. Okay.
Okay, cool. And then so on the flip side of the equation, so I just talked a little bit about like the what we call as an issuance. It's just the NFT that represents the carbon removed by a farmer. On the flip side of the equation, we have certificates, which are exist in the same NFT namespace here inside of this Nori certificate of carbon removal non-fungible token. But these are represented also as individual tokens. So if I sorry, I guess I'll slow down there a little bit. So if I hit this, if I go to nori.com/certificate/1, hit view on blockchain, and then show me my certificate on Etherscan, this will give me, from a buyer's perspective, the kind of reverse side of the equation, which is basically tying an NFT to that initial issuance that the supplier created. So you'll see that the source here is 1. This basically means that this is tied to the first token that was created inside of this same namespace, which we looked at here. And so you'll see that it's basically just breaking down, the individual, amounts that they got. I'll spare some of the details here because it can get pretty in the weeds, but basically it's just, you've got suppliers creating issuances. Then on the buyer side, you've got buyers creating certificates, and those certificates are tied to the issuances that the supplier initially created. So the non-fungible tokens are sort of interlinking each other. So going back to the presentation here, we've got, so I kind of gave a little bit of an intro to the idea of interlinking those NFTs. One of the interesting use cases that we've got recently also is that, I don't know if anybody on the call has seen kind of like the buzz or like the kind of controversy or discussion around like the carbon footprint of of blockchain transactions effectively. And so that post that Jay had mentioned at the beginning of this call, that blog post, kind of goes into some of the kind of nullification of that argument. But another kind of brief introduction to what's inside of there is that you've got this idea that you can actually create transactions that are effectively carbon negative or carbon neutral. Because these NFTs that Nori creates on the blockchain represent carbon that has been removed from the atmosphere in the order of tons, thousands of tons. If you take that effective footprint and you calculate that out, you can effectively take an NFT, a new NFT, like if you've got an artist who's creating a new non-fungible token. For example, I've got here Imogen Heap, who is a musician, who basically is releasing some of her first NFTs as the sort of like music and a little bit of like artwork combined into an NFT. Those NFTs, however, are sort of linking themselves to Nori's NFTs by way of like a certain percentage of that transaction going towards purchasing these NFTs, which then basically makes that basically it certifies like these new transactions as being linked to other transactions that are themselves carbon negative.
And Jaycen, I'd like to interrupt you because I think this is an excellent example of the dynamic nature of property rights and how these NFTs are basically programmable property rights. So here you've got an example of, art and music being programmed to also remove carbon from the atmosphere. I think that's pretty amazing. So
yeah, and just to give a kind of a example there of what that kind of looks like. So similar to how I was kind of diving into some of the details here on how certificates are linked to issuances on the Nori NFT. Similar here, you've got these like detail sections of this OpenSea, which is like an exchange for non-fungible tokens. You can imagine that some of this data gets submitted as part of that same transaction where you've got the interlinking of a new NFT to an existing NFT that exists in the Nori marketplace, for example. So I realize I'm going a little over my time limit here. So just a quick wrap up. About a year and a half or 2 years ago, we actually created a generalizable or generalized implementation of atomic swap for atomic swap marketplaces for NFTs and ERC20s. ERC20 is the fungible token standard effectively. So if you're interested in creating or toying around with the idea of building out fungible to non-fungible token exchanges, you can explore some of those concepts here. You could also follow me on Medium, where I've written at least a few different blog posts on the topic of, or on the topics of NFTs, ERC20s, and sort of like the inter-exchange and swapping of those assets. One of the things that I didn't go too much into is that Nori also has on the flip side of the market equation an ERC20, which kind of is intended to be redeemed on a one-for-one basis. If you've got a fungible token, you can redeem any non-fungible token on a one-for-one basis and retire that asset. I will kind of pause there and actually end the presentation so that everybody else has enough of a chance here.
Cool. Let's hold off on questions for the moment. And I'd like to switch over to Josh Abbott of the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law. And Josh, if you'll tell us your views on NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and kind of a summary of what's happening in the legal realm around this as well.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Jay. Thanks for inviting me, and it's great to be here. Love the presentation by Jaycen. Really interested in learning more, and got a bunch of questions. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone in the law, someone who is background is in law and technology and some economics, and so. When I started seeing the headlines, I became interested. I fell down the rabbit hole, as it were, as people say. And so, if I could just share, if you guys can see that,
you're starting to switch.
Great. I kind of borrowed from some remarks I gave earlier at the law school, so I'll skip through the first few because I thought that Jaycen did an excellent job of explaining NFTs and what they are and kind of how they fit into things. I think it's worth just kind of noting why it's in the news so much lately. And I think that, charts like this kind of tell the story. Just about the explosive growth there's been in them. I mean, people were talking about explosive growth in NFTs before January, and so as we see with exponential growth, soon all of that becomes minimized compared to what we're looking at now. So that is kind of brought them to the forefront. And then, of course, there have been a few very high-profile transactions that's kind of gotten everyone's attention. One thing I came across this chart that I thought was interesting because an obvious question is, what is the value of these things? I mean, they're just really bits of code, right? Entered onto a digital decentralized ledger. So why are people paying so much for them? And I think it helps if you think of them, if you compare them to other collectibles or works of art, right? The question is it authentic? Is it the actual original thing, right? Whether physical or digital. So for example, this painting, right? If it was actually painted by Leonardo da Vinci, and people believe that, then it's going to have a very high market value. Now, if it wasn't the same object, if nobody believes that, then its market value is significantly less. Same thing with Jaycen, I think gave the example of baseball cards or other kinds of collectibles. It's all about whether it is authentic and whether it's believed to be authentic by the market. And so it's the same thing with NFTs, really. And I think it also helps maybe to compare them to, traditional notions of ownership and property. In a traditional transaction, you've got some kind of seller, some kind of buyer. You have some kind of physical or tangible or otherwise some kind of asset that has value, and the ownership of that asset is transferred from the seller to the buyer in exchange for some kind of currency or something. And when we're talking about ownership in an NFT situation, I think it's important to really understand what that means and what it does not mean, because in a lot of, especially press articles, they will kind of gloss over this, and in trying to explain to NFTs in a quickly to someone understands, they'll say, well, it's kind of like owning, digital art. And in fact, that's from a legal standpoint, that's really not what it is. It's important to understand you still have a seller and a buyer, but now the asset exists somewhere in the world in some form, whether it's digital or physical. But when it's tokenized, what that really means is that an entry is made onto a blockchain that refers to that asset, and that becomes the token, the non-fungible token, meaning it refers to that specific asset. And so when we're talking about selling NFTs, first there's the creation of the NFT, which is an entry into a blockchain, and this is often separate, doesn't have to be, but there's a transfer, meaning that a separate entry onto the blockchain identifying the original creator of that token, and then the buyer, and it just says that they bought it for a certain amount of ether or whatever it is. So it's not like in the traditional sense where you're transferring the typical or traditional ownership rights in an asset. What you're really doing is making an entry on a blockchain that refers to the asset that's been tokenized, the seller, and the buyer. So when we're talking about property and ownership in a legal sense, for many, I think hundreds of years, the law has conceptualized property, conceptualized ownership as what we call like a bundle of rights. You imagine this is like a bundle of sticks. Right? So on the left, we have maybe a deed to some real property. And if it's a deed in fee simple, then there are certain rights that courts in the US and around the world recognize that go along with that type of, or that class of ownership, right? So someone who holds property in fee simple, for example, they have the right to possess that property, to control it, to control what happens on it, to exclude others from it, to do things on it or with it, or extract things from it, to dispose of it, sell it, right? And those rights are defined by law. They're defined by terms in contracts. But with NFTs, it's a little bit different. There's no default setting for what actual legal rights get transferred when there's a transaction involving an NFT on a blockchain. It really depends on the blockchain, on the code, on the terms, on the metadata, right, of what rights are actually being transferred. And like we talked about before, that opens up a lot of space for innovation, where you can link together different types of rights in NFTs, or bundle them, or things of that nature. But it could also create a lot of legal and regulatory uncertainty or miscommunication. And so that is important, really, I think important to keep in mind, that the rights that go along with an NFT really depend, and they may not be what the people who are engaged in the transaction think they might be. So, what is an NFT can maybe be approached by discussing, understand what an NFT is not. So an NFT is not by itself the same as intellectual property rights. It may include intellectual property rights if those are incorporated into the transaction, but it's not necessarily part of the transaction. So if you sell an NFT for some digital art, for example, the default is that does not transfer the intellectual property. You don't have the copyright to that art. The creator would retain it. Another thing to keep in mind is that NFTs do not, again, necessarily transfer any kind of, are not necessarily securities, right? But again, they may be depending on whether they meet the definitions of securities under the securities laws. So that's something else to watch out for. I kind of just brainstormed and grouped in these three general areas some of the legal issues that you can expect to come up with NFTs. In the first category, you have all the same kinds of things that come up in any kind of contract situation, right? And this is important to keep in mind, I think, because for efficiency reasons, people want to try to keep to a minimum how much data is actually entered into the blockchain, which is understandable. But unless that data refers to more explicit terms that exist somewhere else in the form of an actual contract or actual terms that governing the transaction, then it may be unclear what those terms include. So, anytime you have a sale of any kind, there are questions around it, like what are the terms and definitions, and severability, what terms apply, what terms can be deemed invalid or unenforceable, limits on liability, choice of jurisdiction, if there are disputes, remedies, third party, all those kinds of things attached to issues around NFTs. The second grouping was just to identify a few of the existing laws and regulatory frameworks that apply to NFTs. We mentioned IP and securities, but there are international trade agreements that you'd have to really watch out for, especially with all kinds of sanctions on certain countries, and the pseudonymous nature of blockchains. This does not NFTs and using a blockchain for transaction does not exempt anyone from laws that otherwise govern them. So, criminal law, tax law implications, of course, privacy, evidence and discovery, moral rights, which is kind of a class of intellectual property. And then there are a whole new set of issues that NFTs raise, such as, who has the right to tokenize an asset? And I think that kind of depends on who holds cognizable legal rights in the asset in the first place, and what's the scope of when you create a token, what kind of rights can be captured through tokenization. Technical standards governing them, a lot of these tokens, Jaycen mentioned ERC, I think ERC 20, and there's all kinds of new standards that are coming out. ERC, I think it was 1155, maybe that it's able to contain both non-fungible and fungible tokens at the same time. So the standards kind of governing how the token is treated in the code or on the blockchain is important. We talked a little bit about linking, or you can imagine like telescoping or embedded NFTs, where NFTs actually the underlying asset is itself an NFT that then becomes tokenized or contains some, and you can ask how far can that go. What are the rights of subjects of tokenized work? So if some kind of image or video clip depicts a person and then is tokenized, what does the person depicted, what rights do they have over their likeness? And then, of course, we've been seeing a lot of recently people complaining about, like, hey, what happened to my my NFT, right? There's if it's being hosted on a website and the website goes down, or something happens to the underlying asset, how does that affect a person's rights or legal recourse? I think we're going to be seeing a lot more integration of NFTs and the underlying digital assets into the real world through augmented reality and other such things. And then, of course, AI opens up a whole new universe of issues around these things. So I didn't want to go too long, but that's just kind of a really quick, broad overview from a legal perspective of what these things could involve. And obviously, none of this is legal advice. I'm not currently licensed to practice in Arizona. I'm none of you are my clients, so I wouldn't try to give any legal advice. But if I could give some friendly advice, it would be that if anyone is considering major or significant transactions involving significant resources involving NFTs or other crypto assets, I would recommend discussing with a competent attorney in the area to protect your interests, I would say. So with that, I'll look forward to our discussion and turn it back to Jay.
That was awesome, Josh. Thank you so much. All right, let's go to Chad Eylander. Chad's one of the most active members of the Desert Blockchain community and also a Desert Blockchain citizen. And Chad was one of the first to bring NFTs to my attention. And so, Chad, will you share with us what your experience is and maybe show us some dashboards and things like that? And let's see, I don't know if you can unmute or.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, there we go. Now we can hear you.
Cool. Let me share my screen here. I'm going to kind of walk you through how NFTs are being used right now. Jay, can you unlock me for the screen share?
You should be able to screen share.
I think Josh brings up some great points, and you're going to see kind of why there are a lot of concerns around NFTs here pretty quickly. Can you guys see this? This is the crypto kitty. So Jaycen brought up in his first talk was kind of how NFTs came to be was on the Ethereum blockchain. They kind of choked it out and brought it to a halt. And I remember at the time thinking, what are these people doing, allowing like this dumb cat app to ruin their blockchain? And from that point until now, the new iteration of CryptoKitties is kind of the Flow blockchain. And let's see, the CEO is Roham. And I watched an interview with him, and he takes me through the story of when they broke the Ethereum blockchain and then tried to move over to Cardano and Polkadot. And they went to all those teams asking, how can you develop a blockchain that's built for us to where we can develop an app that is very user-friendly? And so they couldn't really find a team to help them do that. And so they decided to make their own blockchain called the Flow blockchain. And this last year, they landed a huge partnership with NBA, and which has now evolved into NBA Top Shots. And I'll kind of like take you through what they've built here quickly, and then I'll jump over to kind of the development side, and then we'll jump back and you can kind of see a purchase and kind of what's going on in the space. So kind of the first place that you want to start is your Dapper wallet. I think they probably have the best adoption of any crypto that's ever been around, because I am able to just throw in my credit card, say how much money I want in USD, and put it in here as a Dapper account. And what a Dapper balance is here on USD, but it's actually kind of a middle ground between the crypto space and US dollars. And so as soon as I have that, like now I can play, and then I'm able to buy what they call a pack. And so I'll kind of give you an example of what a pack is. Right now, everything is sold out, and they're let's click here. So you have like a base set, and so the prices range from like your bottom level of a $9 pack to like a $99 pack. And then as you go up the chain, so they get more and more expensive. They have a legendary pack that is $999. No joke. You get 10 moments, but they have $1,000 pack that people are buying. They sell out instantly. I have not been able to buy one. And so this one's 59. Here's a $230 pack. So that's what a pack looks like. And so in a pack, you get a moment, I'll show you my moments real quick. So these are the ones that I own, and these are the 9 that I've gotten so far. Each of these, I guess, as Josh was explaining, I own them. Ownership is vague, though, and what can I do with this? I don't know. And so before we jump into like a moment, and I give you an example of it, let's jump over to kind of the Flow blockchain and take a look at what they've developed as kind of a base layer 1 built for NFTs, for an application that has a great user experience. And so I'll jump over here and kind of show, this is the Flow dashboard, and I'll jump over here. So this is like your wallet. This is your balance in the wallet. I have money, I have 31 Flow staked or delegated staked to their one of the staking nodes. I staked with Berkeley on blockchain or whatever. And so you can go over here and they'll kind of show you how the staking works. Their blockchain is a little bit different than other ones, and it's built around availability. And I was shocked at how much money it costs to get involved in staking. If you want to stake on Flow, you've got to have like 150,000 Flow, and they're like $30 each right now. So like this is a very, very cost prohibitive thing if you want to be an actual like staking node. For me to delegate, you can delegate as much Flow as you want. My return's not going to be great. I'm just kind of doing it because I'm just interested in staking and seeing the process that works. They built this thing called a Flow playground, and I'll kind of show you that real quick. This is in browser IDE, where you can develop your own NFTs and do all of the coding in here, which is kind of unique to already have this kind of a platform developed so that everybody can learn. Over here, they've got like different tutorials and things that you can do. They also, this is probably one of the most interesting things they did, is they built their own programming language called Cadence, which is built off of or modeled after the Facebook programming language called Move. And it's specifically built for NFTs. And I only bring this up because it's a rare thing to have the infrastructure to have a programming language of your own. And it kind of gives a long-term potential and kind of like the longevity of the Flow blockchain. If you're going to support a programming language, then you're going to be around for a long time. And so I think their vision from what started at CryptoKitties is now kind of evolving. And I think that Roham here is kind of like one of those type of leaders in the crypto space that is like built to change with what NFTs are now and will become. Because what they are now is going to be way different than they are in a year. And I can't even kind of define what they are right now that well. I can just kind of show you what's occurring, and you can kind of do what you want with it. So I'll show you, we'll jump back to a top shot, or actually I'll show you one other thing. There's kind of a lot of money exchanging hands, and when you want to withdraw money, this kind of becomes an issue. So either you link your account to your bank account and the bank takes a $25 fee, or if you're me and you don't want to deal with banks, you are allowed to dump it into USDC, which is a stable coin. And then as soon as the stable coin, then like you're off the grid and you can kind of do whatever you want with the money. So kind of keep that in mind, because this is something that I think Josh kind of brought up and worries me a lot is you can get around a lot of ownership issues and securities issues. And are these security? I don't know. I don't make the rules, but it probably is a security. But anyway, I'll take you back to what a Top Shot actually is and what you actually get to buy. So I'll show you my favorite Top Shot that I want to buy. Currently, I'm a little too poor. And Let's see, right here. So this is a Zion Williams block. It's going for its lowest ask of 140K. That seems like a lot of money, and it blows my mind, but that's for every top player, their most rare cards or moments are going for that. And I'll kind of show you what this is. So that's essentially what you own. Let's be honest, it's a meme. And if you went to YouTube right now, you could also watch this for free. This one is one of 50. And one thing that they've done is they've taken the card market that we all grew up with as kids and kind of mimicked that in the digital world. And so you get this video moment, and a huge part of purchasing these things and developing a market is which ones are you buying and what is the actual serial number. So if you hit select and buy here, don't worry, like my account doesn't have enough, I can't accidentally buy this. You can see like you've got the 44th serial number, the 47th, and the 19th. It gets more expensive the lower serial number you have. And so the market right now is based upon a seller. So I am allowed to put any value on whatever my card is, or I feel personally I should get, and just post it. And it gets put into this list, and then people just pick what they want to buy. And so like all of these prices are allocated by the lowest price. But when you click on all of them, there's hundreds of them based on serial number. And I'll kind of show you how I buy these when I do buy these. And so that's what a Top Shot is. I'll show you kind of some of the other side platforms that are being built on the Flow blockchain that I think is kind of an interesting point to emphasize. It's right here. So this is a website called Evaluate Market. This is a couple kids, literally like kids who love basketball, love Top Shots, built this website and linked into the API for Top Shots, and then developed a website where you can get the analytics for the price over time. And so let me show you, this is my first sell ever in Top Shots. Actually, I'll show you this real quick. I bought a pack for $14. This is my account. I'm Eylander. You can tell I used to, like, my value as an account went from 578 down, and the prices have been dropping a ton. But if you go to transaction as a seller, I made a big sell, and I sold this Steph Curry for $495 a couple months ago. And that's basically all the money I have like in my account. That's what I'm using. And so what's interesting is they made this site that you can go back and take this one card that I sold and get a historical value over time of this card. So let me hit all time, and you'll get a scatter chart. And so quickly, like the colors are, this is 0 to 1,000 on the print. Or on the serial number. And so you can see like the lower the serial number ones, these yellows, these are ones going for a lot. And then from 5,000 to 10,000, these are going for not that much. And so like when I sold mine, it was like somewhere, let's see, somewhere around here for $500. It's gone down a ton. So like I made a good sell. But this website itself is an example of what's built on the Flow blockchain, separate from the Flow team. And it's just some kids who liked it and wanted to have availability of more data. Another example is called Crypto Slam, and they have kind of like higher level data where you can see live mints. And so every NFT that's made from every player has to be minted on the blockchain, and that's visible to everyone. And so they keep track of everything that's being minted. And so all the nerds on the community boards are out there talking. They're like, oh my word, there's LeBron's being printed. What pack are they going in? When does the pack drop? It's kind of a big deal. So you can see like as the team, the Top Shots team is like making new ones, you see them right away and they're right here. And so this type of stuff is kind of an interesting novelty that I didn't kind of expect to kind of grow out of it. But there, and these are two websites. There's a ton of others who are doing very similar things, all using data from this blockchain on their own and making these separate, you know, platforms. And so these ones will tell you, you know, what's selling, what's hot, what's being minted. You can see here, this guy purchased 50 and he spent $213,000 over the last 3 days. And so that's a shocking amount of money in my personal opinion. So there's like a vibrant market here. And if we have time, we'll kind of tell you issues that they've ran into with that market.
Chad, why don't we open it up for questions at this point? And I would like to mention, Chad, that my birthday is coming up, and you know, I would love this block shot
well, Jay,
NFT.
You have the ability, like all cryptos, to gift these for free, because from one wallet to another. There has been a problem with using that very like nice gifting ability that has turned into like gifting yourself who has 25 other accounts and then selling them and not being like disclosing your identity. And so like I recently, this is a beta website. I recently found out I'm not able to gift any longer because I don't have enough, I don't have enough moments. You have to have 20 moments sustained in your possession or ownership in order to gift to a friend. And so like I've got two of this same moment here, and I used to be able to gift this to new people who are interested, and I would just hit like send a gift, and now I get this that says, hey, you have to own 20 moments at all time. So this is their way of trying to get around the civil attack of people making 40 to 50 other accounts and then buying up all of the packs. The problem is like on a pack drop, it's a kind of a big deal. They have like NBA players who come on, it's live streamed to Twitch. And if you own a ton of accounts, you can buy up all of the expensive packs, and all the expensive packs always return more than what you pay for them, even though they're $500 to $1,000. And so here's the example of that is this article written by this guy where they identified Vegas Dave, who's kind of a funny bookie name, who's got 1 trillion accounts that he funnels through 3 accounts that he has, and he can control the market for a lot of the high value NFTs. And so this type of thing is something they've had to iterate on their platform to try and defend against. And I don't see an easy solution. This is like a huge internet problem, but they're dealing with it right away. So then they've made these, you know, restrictions on regular people like me who are just trying to send gifts because they want to prevent people from having multiple accounts and then gifting each other and then controlling the price, because then you can list any price you want from a different account to make it a higher or lower price.
So you're saying there's a little market manipulation going on.
Huge.
So we're almost out of time. We've got a question on the live stream, and if you'll stop your screen share, Chad, I'd like to open it up for questions for any of the panelists, from the folks that are on the Zoom first, and then we'll get to the live stream. Any questions, any comments? And we might go over a few minutes. So thank you, Chad. That was awesome. And hopefully you can unmute yourself. If you can't, well, I'll just unmute everybody. And hopefully. Let's see. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself at this point and ask questions. So, any questions, comments? I think those were 3 awesome presentations. Thank you. And I think it's appropriate that Chad ended on some of the possibilities of market manipulation going on here. So beware. Well, I'll go to the question that's from the live stream. Who are the top brokers who sell NFTs, Chad?
Okay, so right now it's platform based. So NBA Top Shots creates those NFTs. They are the content is owned by the NBA just like any other card. Or when you enter into the NBA, you have the you sign the player agreement that they own all of your stuff. And so then they sell these, and now you own the moment. And what owning a moment means, like from what Joshua was saying, is vague. And so there is a contract on NBA Top Shots where you can give ownership of your, or you can give the ability to lend your moments to Top Shots, and they can use them for all advertising if you want to, and you can decide to opt in or opt out. But like the marketplaces right now are centralized around the platform, and how that kind of moves in the future, I don't know. So you have to sign up on Top Shots to go to that and to get these items. There's no like multiple exchanges yet.
Cool. Now, also, if you have a question or a comment, you can hit the reaction button on the Zoom screen and raise your hand. So FYI. I would like to say that, this is also chain centric. So, in other words, it's valid on the Ethereum blockchain, but outside of that, it's kind of questionable. Although Josh brought up some great points that there is this element of authenticity that's a critical piece to the value around this whole thing. Tash, is that how you pronounce
Yes,
it?
hi. Thank you for that and for all the presentations. Joshua, I have a question for you, if I could. I actually am a practicing attorney in the area of contracts law. And I'm joining this meeting because I'm trying to sort of conceive of some of these legal issues and implications. I thought you raised some excellent points. You were talking about the sort of contract issues inherent in this like broader ledger. And, admittedly, I am very much a novice to these concepts, but I'm struggling with sort of the notion of a ledger that is sort of immutable in nature. When you have a regular contract, you can amend that. Can you sort of speak to that as a potential complication in a digital asset being recorded on a ledger that can't be changed once the information is on there?
Yeah, that's a big issue. And this is a concept that a lot of people are struggling with in terms, not just in terms of NFTs or transactions or contracts, but on issues around privacy and how it implicates or how it squares or fails to square with especially some of the newer emerging privacy regimes, such as in Europe, the GDPR, in California and Virginia. A lot of these are open questions and are going to be evolving. But as a practical matter, as I understand it, and people with more technical expertise can correct me, but as I understand it, once a transaction or anything really is entered onto a blockchain, the only way to change it is to make an additional entry that refers to the earlier entry and amends it. Right, so it can't erase it in the idea that we think of, but it can make changes. But the changes it makes are constrained both by what kinds of data you're able to add to a blockchain, and the other thing about it is that you can you can say almost any, I mean, you can add almost anything you want onto a blockchain, but that doesn't necessarily give it legal effect. So, I think there's a lot of, there has been a lot of work done in this area. There continues to need to be a lot of work done. It's a rapidly evolving environment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. A common misconception of blockchains is that they're immutable in like all tenses of time. But as Joshua was saying, like they are better understood as like an append only log, right? So you can add data, you just can't change what you have added. Like you could just say that you can add a new thing that says, scratch what I just said, here's what I meant, type thing. And that goes for state, which means like the information known, the data known to the blockchain, but also goes for logic, which is a little bit more of a complex topic. I have a talk that I did on this. I'll try to find it and link it in the chat, but you can also evolve like the actual underlying logic of execution of a smart contract by sort of saying, look at this logic instead of that logic that was there before.
And Tash, as an attorney, I think, as you get into this realm, you'll find that there's a head-on collision happening between this decentralized innovation and the legacy laws. So, for instance, GDPR in the immutability portion, there's something called blockchain poisoning, where people will put personal information on public blockchains kind of intentionally to fly in the face of GDPR. So there's a lot of interesting legal nuances. So Steve, you can unmute and ask that question yourself. We're going to go, I think we'll go no longer than 10 minutes later. If people have to drop off, feel free to do so. So Steve, you want to unmute?
Yeah. So my question is that with the lawyers in the room, is there any case law or similar case law that would apply here, or that we could look? I mean, I'm not a lawyer and don't have any law background, but do you see any like case law that we could follow that might be, answer some of these questions?
I can only speak based on a cursory search, but in a quick Westlaw search, I found very little, shockingly little, and I think part of the, not to say that there hasn't been litigation, because there has been, but in terms of case law, the litigation has either been settled out of court or is pending or different things like that. But there have been very few, if any, court opinions on the NFTs and some of the application of existing laws to them. Most of what you'll find are in fact not even law review articles, but notes by law students, because they're mostly the ones who are even paying attention and most interested in this. There are a few working in this area, but at this point, it's still pretty speculative, and it's just because it's so relatively new. It just hasn't had time to work its way through the courts and get some of those judicial opinions out there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I would like to say that the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law, through the Law Science and Innovation Center, is exploring some of the very cutting edge, leading edge of the legal and regulatory issues that are being brought up in this whole realm. And Professor Gary Marchand is on this Zoom session, and he teaches a blockchain class at the College of Law there. And if you're interested, please look at their upcoming Governance of Emerging Technology and Science Conference, which I believe is in October, because some of the questions that you're talking about, you'll have a gathering of probably close to 200 of the top people in the world, legal experts and academic experts in the world that are part of the GETS conference, Governance of Emerging Technology and Science. So it's a phenomenal resource if you're interested in the legal implications of this to register for that and participate in it. So is there anything you'd like to say about that, Josh?
Well, thanks for the plug. Yeah, we're excited about it.
Cool. I would like to say that the Desert Blockchain is the Arizona node for the DWeb community. So if you go to getdweb.net, I think it is, they have an NFT session that's going to be kind of like a discussion coming up on the 4th of May. And there's, a lot of global exposure to the getdweb.net community. And I'd highly recommend that you follow their conversations and what the areas that they're exploring, as well as I believe in the fall, they're going to have another DWeb camp, which is an awesome event where you can actually go camping with some of the leading innovators in the world in this space. So I think that pretty well covers it. We're a little bit over time. I apologize for that, but I think it was a very rich session with a lot of different dimensions and so forth. Our next session will be in May, on May 26th, and it's going to be on central bank digital currencies. And if you have any recommended speakers or experts in that area, please let me know. I have reached out to somebody at the Federal Reserve for that, but haven't gotten an answer yet. So we're going to take a look at that. And thank you so much for participating. And please feel free to reach out to me, Jay Carpenter at desertblockchain.com, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future events. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thanks, Jay.